Hey guys, thanks for checking out Ultimate BBQ School's How to Do a Boston Butt. Today we're doing a real simple barbecue Boston butt. And the first thing in having a simple Boston butt is a good setup. You want to make sure that you have a good setup so that there's no hiccups along the way. And here's my setup. This is how I get started. And the first thing I have is my gloves. I have little plastic gloves on. That way I don't get any germs or bacteria on my hand when I'm handling the raw meat. The next thing I have is a bowl, and in my bowl I have a plastic bag. That way when I'm cutting all the fat and trimmings off, I throw it in the bag, tie up the bag, throw it in the trash. I don't have to touch it again. Like I said, we're doing a real simple Boston butt today, and what we're going to be using is a combination of a dry rub. Here we have Bad Byron's butt rub. It's a real simple, kind of a little spicy rub. We've got some brown sugar, and I always take the brown sugar out of the packaging, crumble it up a little bit, get rid of the clumps, and put it in a separate bowl. That way I don't contaminate all of the whole box of the brown sugar. Also I have some garlic powder and some onion powder. The next thing you're going to need is a good cutting surface, and what I have here is a good cutting block, and then I have a towel on top of that, and then a plastic cutting board where I'm going to put my meat on top of it. And the reason why I do that is it gives me a little bit of height, a little bit of leverage, and the towel makes sure that my cutting surface doesn't slip. For a knife, I use a real sharp boning knife, and that way it cuts through the fat without slipping. Let's see what else we got over here. Over here we have a cutting board that has plastic wrap in a T shape, and when I'm done cutting my Boston butt and trimming it all up, I just take it, put it right there, wrap it up, throw it in the bottom of my fridge. So the next thing for us to do, and I always like to do this with my Boston butts, especially when I get them from the butcher, I take them out of the packaging, put them in the sink, wash it off a little bit, get rid of the blood, and bring it back over to the cutting block. So I'll see you over by the sink. Alright guys, we got our gloves on, we're over at the sink now, and we got our bone-in Boston butt direct from our good friends, the New York Butchers over in Atlanta, Georgia. They take care of us really good over there. And here we got a Boston butt. This is 8.1 pounds, about $20, $2.49 a pound. Great deal, and that's barbecue for you. Good quality meat, but at a good price. We're going to open it up here, and we're going to give it a good washing. Get all of the packing juices off of it. Oh, that looks good. Nice fat cap on the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this paper, close it up, put it over by the trash, and give it a good washing over here. Down under the water. Just a quick once over. And I got some paper towels right over here. Put some paper towels down. Just going to dry it off. And the reason why a Boston butt is such a good piece of meat for barbecue is because all the connective tissue in it. And barbecue is traditionally, when you're smoking meat, it's traditionally done low and slow. So what we do is we take the meat, put it on the cooker at a real low temperature. We're going to cook ours in the 220 to 230 range. And all this fat is going to melt and become juices. And all this connective tissue on the bottom is going to melt right off and become flavor for our meat. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this piece of meat over to our trimming board and cut off some of the loose ends, and we'll see you over there. Alright, now that we got our freshly clean Boston butt on our cutting board here, we're going to just do a little bit of housekeeping on the Boston butt, trim a little bit of the excess fat, a little bit of the flappy stuff off of there. What we're going to do, the top of it actually looks really good. I don't know if you can zoom in down here, right over here. The fat cap is really good. There's a nice, about a quarter of an inch all the way through the top of it. And over here, it's a little less fat. And that's good because you'll get a little bit of burnt ends over there. We're just going to take our, like I said, our sharp knife and just do a little bit of trimming of just anything excess that's kind of hanging off there. Anything excess. And this side of the butt looks really, really good. There's a little bit of excess fat right there. Just trim that off. And this side, the top of it just looks really, really clean. They did a really good job over at the butcher shop. And we're just going to flip it over. And if you see any veins or anything like that, go ahead and cut it out. And on a Boston butt, you're going to see this area right here. And this is kind of the fold in there. And the fold has a lot of connective tissue. And sometimes there's a vein running through there. And I always, some people say you do, some people say you don't, cut it out. And I just go ahead and cut it out. There may be a little bit of blood in there, but that's okay. Just, use a paper towel, dab it up. We're just going to cut that little bit of excess fat off. Anything that you can put your finger around, pull it off, just pull that right off there. All that connective tissue in there is going to melt and become juice, so don't worry about a lot of it. But anything that's kind of just hanging off, it just doesn't look right, go ahead and take off. You don't want to cut a lot of meat off. You don't want to do a lot of digging in there. But just some of the fat, anything in there that you can grab on, just cut those little pieces off. And again, this is one of the advantages of having a real sharp knife. You just go in there and pull it right out. And like I said, we didn't do a whole lot of trimming on this, but just 5 or 6 little slices there. We got enough of the fat off, and this is a pretty clean Boston butt. Not a lot of veins running through it, and got most of that off. We'll cut a little piece here. And all this connective tissue, like I said, is going to melt and become juices. And when you cook it low and slow, it gives a chance for the meat to hit a temperature and start to melt. And as it melts and melts and melts, it adds flavor and juice to the meat. And if you cook it really, really hot, what happens is these fat particles and the connective tissue is just either going to stay there or it's going to explode and run out. And when you cook it low and slow, it gives it a chance for it to come to a temperature and melt. And when it's coming to that temperature, usually we call that the cooking plateau. You'll see your Boston butt temperature rise and rise and rise and rise, and you'll think, oh my goodness, it's going to cook too fast, I have to lower the temperature. Don't do it, because when it hits somewhere, and every piece of meat's a little different, but when it hits somewhere in the 150 to 170 range, it's just going to sit there and hold. And it's going to hold for a good while. And while it's holding, all that heat, all that energy is melting the connective tissue. It's a transfer of energy. It's taking the heat from your charcoal and your smoke, going into the meat, melting that connective tissue. And if you cook really, really hot and really fast, all it does is melts the connective tissue right into the bottom of your smoker. It doesn't stay into the meat. All right, so now we got this pretty well trimmed. We're going to start just a couple of quick things here. We're going to do a quick once-over with some onion powder. I just do this just a little bit. I like a little bit of onion flavor, onion powder, and I think it adds a little bit of flavor. We're just going to go over the whole thing one time, just a light dusting. Again, we're not trying to make it an onion barbecue butt, Boston butt, but just a nice once over with some onion powder. A little bit of garlic powder. Don't use garlic salt. Made the mistake one time if you're using garlic salt. Not a good idea. Make sure it's garlic powder. Just a little bit on the top. Rub it in. Now the fat on the top, you can put a little bit more than you can put elsewhere because you're not going to really eat the fat on the top. But just a little bit of garlic powder all around. Make sure you get the sides. And then what I like to do is I like to take a little bit of brown sugar. And remember, I previously had broken up the particles in this brown sugar. And just rub it in a little bit. Just put a little bit on it. You're not, again, putting a whole bunch on. Just a little bit. A little bit of brown sugar. All this is going to kind of melt in the refrigerator overnight and get absorbed into the meat. So I just kind of rub on some of the brown sugar. You're going to make a little bit of a mess, but that's okay. It's barbecue. And the barbecue is going to kind of caramelize and help with some of that nice burnt ends that we all like to eat. And just rub some brown sugar there. Make sure you get the sides. The sides are where you get your crispy burnt ends from. So I put a little bit extra on the ends there. All right. Got some brown sugar in there. Just gonna put all this extra crumbles into my trash. All right. Next, we got Byron's Butt Rub. Bad Byron's Butt Rub. This stuff is fantastic. Got a little bit of heat in it, but a lot of flavor. And we're just going to sprinkle some on here. And I put a little bit more butt rub than anything else. And I put it on the top, a little bit heavier than I do everywhere else. And I just pat it in. All you can do is pat it in a little bit. Then I go ahead and stand it up on the top here, sprinkle a little in there, get some in the fold. And you don't want to go real heavy in here, only because there's a lot more meat and a lot less fat. And flip it over. Sprinkle some on the bottom. Rub it in. Get a nice coating. some on the sides. And you'll notice already, if you look down at the cutting board, you'll see that the juices have started to come out a little bit, and the brown sugar is starting to melt. Alright, got a pretty good dusting here of our Boston butt, maybe just a little bit more on this side. Alright. I think we're pretty good. Now what we're going to do is, I have a setup over here, some cellophane on top of a cutting board, and I like to use that setup because it adds just a little bit of sturdiness. And I'm going to take this and put it in the refrigerator, just making sure all my ends here are coated. Alright, a little bit more brown sugar there. Alright, so I don't know if you can zoom in on the Boston butt. And you can see we don't have a real thick coating. Some people put a real lot of rub on there. We have a good dusting over the whole thing. All the exterior surface has a little bit of flavor on it. Put a little bit more touch in there, just a little bit. Rub it in. And I think we're about done. Alright, so you can still see the meat through it. And then we're just going to take it and we're going to move it over to our plastic wrap, wrap it up, and we'll be all set for tomorrow. So here we go, right in there. Now I've already set this up in kind of a T shape, so all I do is I fold this over, fold the ends up, and here's the fun part, I take off my gloves here, because at this point I'm not touching anything that has meat on it. Wrap this side up, and we've got a Boston butt that's ready for the refrigerator. So next up, we'll see you guys outside at our smoker when we're ready to put this bad boy over some coals.